Okay, everyone, welcome to week 3. We're already at that third week of class, so we're a quarter of the way through already. These classes just fly by, especially this time of year, don't they? So be looking for your week 2 work to be completely back to you and graded by Friday. I do already have your quizzes back to you, your discussion boards, as well as any selected images. A few of you still have not selected images for your theory application paper. It's really important that you get those into me so that I can approve them. I hate when students don't, and then they write their outline and I have to come back and say, you know what, these images really aren't going to work. You're making your life a lot more difficult, and then they have to go back and change it. So it's important that you get those images to me. So those of you who have not done that yet, please do that ASAP. Any questions about work I've graded thus far, let me know. I'm more than happy to go over things with you in more detail. And again, be looking for those. Mini art cyclopedias will be back to you by Friday at the latest. Those take me a bit longer to grade than quizzes and discussion boards, etc. So moving on, we're talking about form, content, and context this week. So in your reading, we are doing chapter 2 and 4 of visual culture. This is probably the heaviest reading week you have. So just dive into it, with courage. And if you have questions along the way in these chapters, do not hesitate to send me an email or a text message and say, hey, this part on page 94 is giving me a hard time. I'm not quite sure what they're saying. I'm more than happy to talk you through these things. I love when students ask me those kind of questions. So you have that reading, and then in looking at art, chapter 6, art in and out of context. So we're looking at form, we're looking at ideology, and we're looking at context really this week. So I like to give you notes for the visual culture text because it is a bit heavier. So I want you to really focus on this whole concept of form, about who Roger Fry was, because he is the second theorist we're going to be using in that theory application paper. I've given you a couple of clips. There's a YouTube clip about Jackson Pollock and one of the music video Wonderwall. These are both pieces of art that are used in this chapter. So if you're more of a visual learner like I am, I like to be able to engage with these kind of artifacts as to further my understanding of them instead of just reading about them. So Roger Fry, the 5 emotional elements of design. This is a major focus. So he talked about the rhythm of the line, mass, space, light, and shade, and color. And these are the 5 elements that you are going to be writing about for those 2 works of art that you chose. So make sure you spend a little bit of time with that. So chapter 4, this is where we get into some deep stuff. John Berger, interesting guy and theorist, during the 20th century, actually just passed away not too terribly long ago in the span of history. And he did this whole documentary series for the BBC called Ways of Seeing, and I've given you a link here. This is totally extra enrichment. You by no means have to watch these. It's not a required viewing. You will not be tested on it. But if it's something you're interested in, I like to just always make these things available to you. So he says seeing comes before words. What did he mean by that? He talks about making the art of the past mystic and how this is an ideological approach and how this can both be descriptive. It can help us describe a work of art, and be prescriptive. It can help us prescribe meaning to a work of art. He talks about recontextualizing the past, and that kind of goes along with making art of the past mystic and this whole holy relic debate that he goes into. That we kind of go on this religious pilgrimage to see, iconic works of art. He talks about our importance of seeing the real thing, the authentic version, not just a replica, and asking ourselves why this is so valuable. So we want to look at context. Can a work mean something different for us today than it did for its original audience based on our knowledge of the world? We look at Hans Holbein the Younger, The Ambassadors, and I've given you a link to that work. You want to really think about the symbolism of an image, and it uses The Ambassadors as kind of a study in walking through symbolism. We want to look at art being polemic. So look at what that word, when you come across that word, you may want to look up what it means. I'm not going to give it away for you. It talks about Fuller's perspective, another theorist. So a lot of the theorists, the authors do a good job in this chapter of presenting one side to you, which is John Berger's, and then giving you some other ideas of some theorists that don't necessarily agree with Berger and what he had to say. And I want you to remember that just because we read it in a textbook or that a theorist, remember these are theorists, art theorists, if they say something, it doesn't mean it's the end-all be-all. This isn't fact, it's hypotheses, right? It's ideas about art and how to understand art. So we also look in this chapter about the politics of gender. How are women viewed in art? And this is a really important topic in the art world and very relevant today. We're going through kind of this neo-feminism movement, so it's incredibly relevant in 2017. I want you to consider what is the difference of someone who is nude versus naked in a work of art. And Laura Mulvey is a brilliant theorist, and she wrote a lot about this earlier in the 20th century. Viewing art from a male point of view, and that we're all kind of conditioned to view things this way. There's another theorist named Thompson, and he gives a three-part analysis: the social and historical conditions in which texts are produced, the way they are received by real people, and our familiar close analysis of the text under discussion, which is what we like to do in this class. And I normally don't go over all of these notes each week in this announcement, but I like to go over them because this is probably the heaviest chapter you've got. And I'm not saying that to intimidate you or scare you away from it, but to prepare you so that you go in, again, with zeal and with courage and just dive into this chapter and know that it's okay if you don't get all of it, but you will get something from it, and there are some really valuable ideas, and again, I am here to walk through that with you. Okay, your reflection this week is a journal entry, and you need to just pick from one of these prompts. So the first one is going to be about John Berger, and he believed that we mystify the art of the past by making it into this holy relic. And this does not mean that the art is necessarily religious in nature. So it doesn't mean necessarily it's a painting of Jesus or a Madonna or something of that nature. Take the Mona Lisa, for example. We tend to treat this as this kind of holy icon of the art world. We go on pilgrimages to see it, to experience it in this ritualistic manner. And I want you to select a work of art that you think fulfills this idea of being a holy relic. And why? Do you think this is a healthy or unhealthy way to view art? And be sure to include the actual image of the work in your journal entry with proper citation, of course. So that is one option for this reflection. The other is dealing with what Laura Mulvey has to say in this chapter, that when we are viewing art or watching films, the gaze is male. Do you agree with this? Do you disagree? Support your opinion with evidence from the text, or if you want to do a little bit of your own research. Remember, these are quick. These are a good page-long journal entries, so give me more than a paragraph, but don't give me an essay here. I don't want you to spend hours and hours on this. This is more about sharing ideas and your opinion about these kind of things, and learning to back up our opinions with data and with some good supporting evidence. Okay, next on the list, we are writing an outline for our theory application paper. So again, this is that 6 to 8 page paper. The prompt is in week 4 of your learning activities, and at this point you should have already looked through that and be very familiar with that at this point. And you're going to submit this outline. The more complete your outline is, the more feedback I can give you for your paper. So please, please be sure to view the rubric for this assignment also before submitting. I have included a copy of the outline for you to download in 2 formats. So it's in a Word document and a PDF. And I'm just going to go over this as briefly as I can. Try not to be too long-winded in these announcements. This is worth 35 points, which may not seem like a ton in the scheme of the class, but the value of this outline is important and way beyond those 35 points. Because writing about art is kind of learning this whole new language, which is why we did the mini art encyclopedia, why we're talking a lot, building up over our vocabulary and our understanding of art terminology in the first couple weeks of this class, so that you can start to write about this. But because this is new, I do this outline to help you structure and formulate this paper, and for me to then give feedback and help to guide you, where some ideas are maybe need some work, or where you're really shining. So I like to be encouraging where I can, and I like to give a lot of feedback. So be thorough here. The more effort you put into your outline, the better your paper is going to be. I want you to think Basically, you are writing your paper this week. You're doing all the work. You're doing all the research. You're formulating everything. You're pulling any quotes. Basically, anyone should be able to take this outline and write your paper, okay? So that way next week is really just about putting all of this information into paragraph form and formatting it. Next week, week 4, should be relatively quick and easy. This is where the meat and potatoes is of this assignment, is this week in this outline. So I want a good introduction, a good hook thesis sentence, really pull your reader in here. Introduce your 2 chosen artworks. And this is just, that you're going to be talking about Van Gogh's Sunflowers, and you're going to be talking about whatever else. Introduce your artworks. Like, you don't need to write out the full citation. You don't need to give a biography on the artist. This is just a brief paragraph here. And then introduce the theories that will be discussed, so Panofsky and Fry. One thing to keep in mind when you are writing and mentioning these people for the first time, that you would want to say Erwin Panofsky and Roger Fry. And then from there on, you can refer to them as Panofsky and Fry. Never just Erwin and never just Roger, right? These are not our buddies. Just like you wouldn't say Andy instead of Andy Warhol, right? We want to use their formal names here. We talk about this in the writing styles presentation, but I mention this because students always do it. So this is like a quick paragraph on each of them. Again, I don't need their whole life story and biography. This is Erwin Panofsky is this person, and this was his theory. This is who Roger Fry was, and this is his theory. This is just introducing the concept so that when you then go to write about it, your reader understands what you are referring to. So in the next part, you're going to walk through these 3 levels of Panofsky. So take your first image, walk through that primary, secondary, and tertiary level, and then do that with the second image. In that tertiary or intrinsic level, this is where you should include some research. We know that this is about looking outside the picture frame. This is about context. This is about personal history. This is about social history. This is about why the artist created this work. So do some research on the artist, not just the subject matter. Sometimes students will, pick a work that's from World War II about a specific battle scene, and they'll do a great job of researching that battle scene or that battle that took place, but they won't do any research on the artist and why this artist was interested in this subject and why they were creating this scene specifically in the way that they did. So remember, this is really that primary and secondary level are kind of leading up to this intrinsic tertiary level. With Fry, how do your chosen works illustrate the principle of the actual and imaginative life? Consider why. And this is, those of you who actually watch these videos all the way through, I like to throw in some nuggets here. So when you're looking at this, we know that something can be abstract and still represent the actual life and the imaginative life, because it may be representing the reality of emotion, right, in a scene. And the reverse can be true, that something can be naturalistic but can be a completely imagined scene. Just because it looks like the real world doesn't mean that that place exists at all in the real world, or that moment actually ever happened. So there's always a little bit of both going on here. How is the emotional impact shaped not by what is shown, but by how it is shown? This is when we're going to start to introduce these emotional elements of design, and that the way a work of art is structured, its content and its those formal elements of design and all of that stuff are shaping our understanding of it. So, it's not just what is being shown, but how an artist is representing it. And so then we'll go into Fry's 5 emotional elements of design. You're going to compare and contrast your 2 images. So we'll go through the rhythm of the line, mass, space, light and shade, and color. Be sure in this section that you are always relating these elements back to the emotional impact they are having on the viewer. That's kind of what Fry is all about. And sometimes students will leave that part out. They'll talk about the lighting, but they won't refer back to, what the lighting does here is it really creates an intimate moment, or the lighting is not naturalistic at all, and it creates this dreamlike space because this isn't a real space. It's kind of more of a mental space. So these are all ideas I want you to be considering. And then I want a strong conclusion. How have the theories of Panofsky and Fry been useful in discerning the meaning and emotional impact of the 2 works of art? What else you need to include in your outline here? Any quotes from the text or outside research that you will use in your paper, place these under the number or letter in the outline that is relevant. That way I'm making sure and I'm trying not to micromanage you, trust me. This is the only time we do an outline in this class. This is really designed for you to practice and for me to then give you good feedback and encourage you so that you are successful in your final papers. So make sure that you put that information where it would be placed in your paper. Make sure you do your works cited section now. Get it over with. Get it done. And that way next week, guess what? Once you've written the whole paper, you don't then have to go back and do a works cited section. You've already got it done. Make sure you include your images here in the outline with proper citations, not just links to the images, the actual images. And remember, please do not write in first-person narrative voice. No I, me, my. We don't have to validate or back up our own opinions because opinions are opinions. But when we are writing from the perspective of we are presenting information with evidence to support that information, then that's where we want to be. This is a formal academic paper, so we're not going to use I, me, my. That is your outline. So again, I walked through that in a little bit more detail, but I really want you to be successful here, and this is going to allow me to give you some good feedback. If you don't complete your outline, there's not really a lot for me to do for you, okay? So let's help each other out at this point. Okay, and you have your quiz as usual. You should know these quizzes are pretty quick. You have one attempt, no time limit, but it has to be done in one sitting, and it's due Sunday night at midnight. So Sunday night at midnight, we've got our quiz, we have our theory application paper, and we have our reflection that are due. Any questions about what we've got going on this week or grades thus far? Anything at all? Don't hesitate to ask me, and have a fantastic week.